Wake up your morning in a brand new way with the positive people, places, events, and things in and around your neighborhood and around the world. No matter where you live, your mornings are about to get better. It's the refreshing way to start your day. No doom or gloom, just bright sunshine no matter what the weather. Metro Magazine with Bonnie McDaniel. Inspiring, informative, intelligent, Ion. Positively the best way to start your morning.
When I first found out about my sister's self-harm, I didn't understand at all why she would want to hurt herself. And I try to understand why it makes her feel better, but it's a hard concept to grasp if you're not the one feeling it. And it's just sad because I don't know how to help her with it, but I don't want to overstep my boundaries with it.
Good morning. You were just watching excerpts from an exciting new documentary by Monica Zinn entitled Self-Inflicted. And she's here with us this morning to tell us about this film and also to talk about her works. Monica, welcome to Metro Magazine.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. And you know, I was talking to you off camera and I am so fascinated by you. First of all, you're 21 years old. Mm-hmm. And when I think about all the things that you have done and are doing, you seem like you're so much older. So I want to talk about your upbringing a little bit. Okay. You said you're one of 4 children?
Yes,
okay.
I'm the third of 4 children.
Okay. And you also mentioned that your parents are missionaries, so you've done a lot of travel. So talk about your upbringing a little bit, because I think it will give us a basis to talk about the work that you're doing.
So my parents were missionaries when they got married, mm-hmm. and they had my older siblings in the States, mm-hmm. and then they moved to Costa Rica, where I was born, mm-hmm. and so I was born in San Jose, Costa Rica, which is the capital, and then we moved to Tegucigalpa, Honduras, mm-hmm. where my little sister was born, and pretty much my dad was a pilot, and he would fly medical supplies to remote villages that didn't, they couldn't get to hospitals, they didn't have access to medical supplies, but simultaneously that's where my family was living. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, when I was very young, my mother got very sick there, and it became very hard for her to take care of 4 children while being in a remote village in Central America, and she herself not having access to the type of modern medicine that she had been used to. Mm-hmm. So when I was very young, we did end up moving back to the States, and so I grew up in Virginia. Okay. But it was always kind of this story that we knew about. We were born and everything, and I was always very excited to tell people that I had dual citizenship with Costa Rica, even though I don't remember being there. Uh-huh. And I've traveled back to Honduras twice for mission work, but I've never gone back to Costa Rica. But it's definitely something that excites me to know that that's a part of my story. Mm-hmm, but yeah, so. Yeah,
and I know too that you brought up the fact that you were here in Northern Virginia, and that you had worked a lot with filmmakers, and I guess that's where your interest in filmmaking mm-hmm. came from. Talk to me about that, and talk about your education, because you're still finishing up school and mm-hmm. all of that. So talk about that a little bit.
So the first film courses that I had taken were at the Fairfax Academy, so I was taking mm-hmm. professional television production, mm-hmm. which sounds like it's just TV based, but it's mm-hmm. really professional television and film production. Mm-hmm. And so it's a 2-year program, and it takes up like half of your day. And so you have to, leave your school and go, and you're there, and you get more credits for that class than you do for other classes, because mm-hmm. it takes up more time. And that was definitely the first time that I was around people who were as interested in stories as I was. Mm-hmm. But it was also where I realized, I think, how serious I was about it. Mm-hmm. Not like, it's not like I had to make a career like right then when I started, mm-hmm. but that I was serious about all the projects that I did. It wasn't just fun for me. I really cared, and I really wanted to learn and be better, and it was all just very serious for me.
So what is it about storytelling that fascinates you?
I don't know. I think just because that's the way I've always made sense of the world. Okay. I always
In what way?
I think we all, so I mean, the past, what we tell ourselves about the past is really just a story that we tell ourselves. And so I think, I mean, when I was younger and I didn't really have that much of a past, I had this just vast imagination. So my reality was, you know, all of the stories that I would tell myself that weren't necessarily real. You know, I had imaginary friends. I had 2 imaginary friends who lived in my stomach, and they were called Shegley and Begley. And they existed long enough for me to remember them, and I felt very dearly towards them. They were real to me like anything else. And
so you had a big imagination from very early on.
Yes, and my family just loved it. I was like the just kooky kid of the family, and in a very like endearing way. But yeah, I mean, I remember, and they both died, and I told my family about it. Like I was just like, you know, they're like, oh, where's Shegley and Begley? And I'm like, oh, well, they died. And it was just like I was sad internally, but I was so comfortable with, I was just like, oh, like I'm moving on, like I know that it's okay. But it wasn't like I knew that they were never real. They were always very real to me. And so I think it's all like from very early on, I just always lived in my head, and that's what was comfortable, and that's the way that I was developing. You know, it definitely didn't hinder me at all. If anything, it you know, made me special, because I was so content just being alone, just writing or talking to myself. Or if I, you know, got my dad's camera, I would film myself advertising the different objects in my sister's room, which that is a real thing. There is video of me like advertising like a box of crayons when I'm like 8, because I would just, you know, see these infomercials and be like, oh, that looks so fun. Like I'm gonna go try to do that. And so I think that's just always how I've been. You know, if I've seen like a way that someone's telling a story or something that really excites me, if I notice like a change in myself when I see something, so that would be especially with, you know, movies and television.
So let me ask you, so that the audience can understand the difference in how you think versus someone else who is not interested in filmmaking. If you walk into a room, what are the things you're looking at that maybe the average person isn't looking at or seeing that would make you be different in terms of filmmaking, in terms of formulating an idea for a documentary? What is it that you're seeing that other people don't see?
I think when I was younger, people around me were just characters, and so if I would walk into a room, it was, people would become almost the mythological versions of themselves. Like just their traits would stick out in such a way where when you watch a movie or something, you see a lot of people who have almost like extreme personalities, like they're the extreme version of themselves. But when you interact with people like on a day-to-day basis, they don't have those types of personalities that you see like in TV or in the movies. And so I think when I was younger, because I had been watching so much media, that's how I absorbed people. So I would write, you know, songs about people in my class or something that were totally based on just like almost like the mythological version of them, you know, this idea of them that was being presented to me. Now it's a lot, I mean, I make documentaries now, so it's a lot more real. I just I look to absorb the real qualities, the microaggressions, the everything under the surface, and so that's what I kind of see now. And I try and not just see you know, these ideas that are presented, but really, you know,
you're looking beyond the surface, in other words.
Yes. So I mean, I love watching people. If I walk into a room, I'm more just gonna focus like on people's like energies and like how they make me feel, and what they're bringing to the table and how they're different from other people that I've met. But when it comes down to it, I'm definitely a people person.
So you mentioned the fact that you're looking beneath the surface. Is this something that, because you're able to feel other people's energy, is this something then that you're able to talk about how you translate that into making a film?
Well, I think it starts with, so in reference like to my documentaries, the first one I made, Perfection, which was about eating disorders. Growing up, as a young woman, I obviously knew what eating disorders were. I never struggled with an eating disorder, and it, to me, always just seemed like something that just, it made sense, because in my head I was like, oh, I would like to look like a different way sometimes, but not enough to make that step. And so I think I was always kind of curious about, oh, like what does it take to like make that step? And then when all it took was just really listening to my friends who did struggle with them once they started talking to me about them, because it all happened kind of at one time. Like 3 of my friends had told me that they had been struggling, or I had heard about someone who had been struggling with an eating disorder. And all it really took was just like sitting down and listening. And once I kind of just removed the story I had been told about eating disorders and listened to my friend telling me about her struggles, that's kind of when it became different.
Now, Perfection was your very first documentary?
Yes.
Okay. And we're going to delve into both of them in a moment, but going back to your filmmaking and how you became involved in doing this, you said you went to the academy. What made you decide that you wanted to attend the academy? What motivated you to do that?
So my sophomore year, my counselor had handed out this course booklet of all of the courses that you could take as a junior, because you didn't have to take like gym class and stuff as a junior. All of these electives opened up in your schedule, so everyone was very excited about, oh, you can take film studies, or you can take AP psychology. And I read the entire course booklet just because I was so excited to like take something different. And I had seen professional television production, and it said, that you'd get to work in a studio, and that you'd learn about filmmaking and how to write scripts and how to direct. And it really just became something that I like wanted to do. It was, it kind of just made sense. Like when I read it, it was like, oh, that's what I want to be in. That's what I want to take. I hadn't ever thought that I would make films, especially not documentary films. It was just that class. It was like, almost like it was just like shining out at me in the course booklet.
Now it's interesting, because when I looked at your documentary and I knew you were attended college, I immediately thought you had majored in filmmaking. And the question I'm going to ask you now is, you are a communications major. Why communications versus filmmaking? So
I didn't decide on communications major until I was a sophomore in college. I did start out as a film major at Savannah College of Art and Design. And there I had kind of just discovered that I wasn't going to get the classes that I wanted to take, even though I thought that I wanted to take more film classes. I had kind of realized that the education that I got at the academy that was the step that I needed. There wasn't any more steps in my mind, education-wise, that I needed to take in order to do what I wanted to do. So I left SCAD and started going to community college, and was just getting a liberal arts major. And I had taken a communications class just because it satisfied one of my requirements, and it was interpersonal communications, and I absolutely fell in love with that class. Okay. It was something that I was immediately understood everything that they were talking about. It just all made sense to me, and I was very passionate about it, but I didn't really know what that meant. I was just like, well, it's kind of like a weird thing to be so passionate about, but it's all about the small interactions with people.
And to me, I connected the dots immediately when you told me what you were taking, but I wanted to hear from you, because your documentaries are primarily about people. Yeah. And so it would make sense, if you have an understanding of how people think and how they relate to one another, that could absolutely make you a better filmmaker. Right. And I wanted you to share that to people on camera, because the average person would think, oh, she's taking communications, so she's a filmmaker. But in my mind, it makes absolute perfect sense.
So I love every communication class I take. I think that it gives so much to me for my filmmaking. I don't think that I would like just taking classes based on the technical skill when I'm in college, because to me, a a major as, you know, a field of study, and that's what I want to be studying is communications as people, and communications is such a mix of, you know, psychology, sociology, you know, like mass communication, things like that. It's very media based a lot of the time, and I also really like doing that. I like analyzing a lot of media because I consume so much of it. So it definitely did make sense to me as well. But
okay, and we're going to take a quick break and be right back with more Metro Magazine. In the meantime, I want you to take a look at just a little bit more from our latest project entitled Self-Inflicted. We'll be right back.
Self-harm has always made me sort of squeamish because I personally I've never really understood it, but I guess some people feel the need to do it, and it sort of makes me sad because there's other ways to deal with your pain, and sometimes I just don't know how to deal with people who do self-harm because I don't know what they're feeling or why they feel the need to self-harm.
If you're just joining us, we're here with Monica Zinn, who is the filmmaker of an exciting new project entitled Self-Inflicted. And Monica, when we went to break, we were just talking about your educational background and how your communications study is really playing a big role in your being an exceptional filmmaker. And I'm sure our audience was able to see just a little bit of just how great you are at this craft. So let's talk now about the projects. We touched on the very first project you did. Now, when was the one on, what was the first one?
Perfection.
Perfection. When was that one done?
I began Perfection when I was 17 years old in the academy when I was a senior in high school.
Okay.
And I had just been reading my friend's blog, and she wasn't too close of a friend, but it was, you know, I had just been reading her blog, and she had this exceptionally written blog post about her struggle with eating disorders. And I knew that she had struggled with eating disorders. I knew she had struggled with self-injury, which again were just stories I had been told about her. And then to see her side of it, and she said so many things in that where I was just like,
what was it in her blog that really touched you to let you know that this is a project you wanted to do?
It was so honest. It wasn't.
What were some of the things she said in the blog? Do you remember?
Well, yeah. So that blog ended up being the narration for Perfection. That blog post, I was so in love with it that I was just like, record this, please. And so that ends up being like the intro and everything. It was. I mean, it was a confession. She begins by saying, you know, this is a confession, and she talks about how not only, you know, does she struggle with eating disorders, but because she saw the different disordered eating behaviors that other people had, and how it was like a spectrum, you know, and that's how I view things now. Everything's just like, it isn't, you know, black or white, it's shades of gray. And to hear that about eating disorders, which in my mind was like, well, you either have an eating disorder or you don't. And she's like, you know, talking about the different disordered eating behavior she would notice in other people and herself. And
such as, give me some examples.
She was very detail oriented. So she would, when she would get really stressed out and depressed, she would plan out her days, and she would plan out what she was going to eat, if she was going to binge or not, when she was going to fast, and when she was going to do other things in the day as well. And that really stood out to me, that she was that detail oriented. And I mean, sometimes it just takes, so something that had also stood out was that she talked about anorexia and bulimia, which were two things that I knew about. But again, I only knew the basics, which was, okay, anorexia is when you don't eat, and bulimia is when you throw up after you eat. And in her blog post, she's talking about it's way more complicated than that. To be diagnosed with anorexia, there are all of these qualifications that you have to meet. If you're a woman, you have to stop getting your period. That's a qualification you have to have in order to be diagnosed with anorexia.
So does this fall in the category of a black or white that you were talking about,
right.
and not the detail that really, okay.
Yeah, so if you are at like a hospital or something, these are the things that they're going to go over to be in the category of having anorexia nervosa, which is the full term of it. You have to have I don't know the exact number, but like a extremely low BMI, which is something that for a lot of people, it doesn't matter how little you eat, your BMI is not going to drop to a certain point just because of the way that you're built, which had stuck out to me because I knew that immediately. I was just like, if I stop eating and as someone who's built differently than me stop eating, we're going to get different BMIs. They'll be lower than our natural BMIs, but it's not going to go, like for certain people, it's not going to go below that number. For bulimia, which was really surprising because to me I thought, okay, if you throw up at all after you eat, or if you do any sort of binge purge behavior, you're bulimic. It's actually that you have to have a binge purge happen twice a week for 3 or more months.
Is this the medical diagnosis,
yes, the medical diagnosis
as opposed to the gray area that you talk about?
Right.
Okay.
So then she also talks about the gray area, which is, at the time was EDNOS, and I think there's a different term for it now, but EDNOS is eating disorder not otherwise specified, which is the gray area. So that's pretty much disordered eating behavior, which means, you can have a binge purge, but it may be happening, not as frequently, or, you're not eating, but your BMI didn't drop that low. Or for a lot of people, it's a mix of the both, because it's, if they have the same outcome, if they're wanting to have the same outcome, and I also didn't know exactly what different types of binge purge behaviors there were. I didn't even really know what a binge was. I had only focused on the purge, oh, you throw up. Did not realize that there was a binge at all that happened. So that means that you have to be eating an incredible amount, like more than people would eat in a day, and then throw it all up twice a week, at least. And so to me, that seemed extreme. When you have people who, just get so anxious or depressed or fixated on something that they do binge and purge, to me, it's like, okay, that's already a problem if you have done that once. But again, so that's the gray area is EDNOS. And I think that's what really stuck out to me was, oh, wow, disordered eating behavior, not anorexia or bulimia, which again is the extreme if you meet those qualifications. But wow, look at this. And then once you know that, then it's like the numbers of people who struggle with eating disorders becomes a lot bigger, So it's not, oh, it's this many people struggle with anorexia or bulimia. It's look at this many people that just have disordered eating behavior. So that's what we kind of talk about in the film was how the three characters in it were, there was one who did meet the qualifications actually for both anorexia and bulimia, but then the other two, it was a mix. It was the gray area.
So let me ask you, when you decided to take this project on, what were you hoping to accomplish? First of all, obviously to tell the story, but what was the purpose behind doing it in the first place?
I think when I met with her after reading her blog to talk about the possibility of doing a project.
Was it to tell the story, or were you looking to have and make an impact with the film, is what I'm asking.
Well, so since it was a school project, I didn't have any idea I didn't even know that there was a chance of it making impact. For me, I almost wanted it for us, for her to have something to show people, to explain what she was going through. Because at the time, no one in her life really knew. I think her best friend knew, but her parents didn't know. She hadn't sought any help.
So in a large sense, this became her voice.
Yes,
okay.
and so I I just wanted her to have something to, you know, be able to explain to people, and to also to show her too, to like have her tell the story and, you know, kind of read it back almost like a diary. And you know, that was kind of the purpose of it for me. I had no idea of the impact that it could have or that it would have in the future.
So what happened with the film after you made it? You did it for her.
Yeah.
So how did it get into the hands of other people?
So I made it in a matter of months, which was extraordinary because Self-Inflicted has taken 3 years. But first I just made it for a school project, and it was 20 minutes in length. And then I left it alone for a couple months. And then she actually, once she watched it, was still going through a lot. And I think watching it was extremely hard for her, but it was showing her kind of how unsustainable what she was doing was. And she didn't like seeing herself like that. And she even says watching it now, she just, you know, feels for like her past self, you know, that was struggling like that. And so she actually ended up getting help for a number of things a little bit after that the 20-minute version, the original version, had been made. And so at first it had just been kind of getting like shopped around online, like on people's blogs and stuff, mostly in the area because people like knew her and everything. And then towards the end of the year, my teacher, Dave Ruby, was like, make a 10-minute version of this because I think it's going to be a lot easier for people to swallow. I mean, he loved the longer version, but he was just like, you know, make a shorter version for this final project that we had in the class. So I did that, and then again I left it alone because I just had no idea what potential was for those sorts of things. Went to college. When I came back from Savannah College of Art and Design, he was like still emailing me. He was like, why haven't you submitted this to film festivals? Like, what are you doing with this? And in my mind it was kind of like, gee, okay, why would anyone else like want to watch this? And he had been saying, he was just like, this is the first project that has come from this class that I think people outside of this class and outside of this community would appreciate. And so I started submitting it, and it got into 7 film festivals across the country, and won Best Documentary at the Virginia Student Film Festival. And I actually went to, I think, 2 or 3 of the film festivals with Shannon, who's the main character in it, which was just like, I think, so therapeutic for the both of us to see the impact like head on. And we would go and we'd, you know, sit in the front and watch it, and we'd like hold hands because it was just, you know, it was tough, you know. I mean, it was, I think, very uncomfortable for the both of us.
I was about to say, I imagine for her, because this is talking about being exposed.
Yeah,
this
to
is
people
like,
you don't know now.
Right.
You know, it's not the community anymore. It's a way larger audience. But I mean, the flip side of it was, you know, we would go into these film festivals, and obviously a lot of people there had already seen it because they're the people that organize the film festival and everything. And at one of them, we were getting food, and this woman came up to us, and she looks at Shannon, and she was like, Shannon? And Shannon's like eating, and she was like, yes. Like, she just had no idea what was going on. She was just like, oh my gosh, you know, I saw you in the film like Perfection, and it's just, you know, so beautiful, and it just like changed me and everything. And we're both just like looking at each other like, how the heck is this happening? Like, you just got like recognized like at this film festival. And then of course, after the film had been shown, multiple people, you know, coming up to her, just crying, just, you know, because there were so many more people in that gray area than we had thought. And so they're coming up like, oh my gosh, you know, I this is what I would hear a lot. I hate seeing things about eating disorders, especially people who would struggle with them, because they never do it right, or it's very stereotypical, or, you know, I don't feel like I like connect with it. And that, I felt like, told my story, you know, because it was it was the gray area. And so that was amazing for me to see. It was kind of like, oh wow, that instinct that I had about this being very important, because I had never heard it before, and I was just like, why haven't I heard this side of the story before? Right. Especially when it's affecting people so much. So that was very, that's when I just discovered how powerful this medium is. And
yeah, it really is, because you do get to tell people's stories and do it in a very powerful way, I think.
When you get to be in control of the way those stories are portrayed.
Exactly.
You're in control of all of that. I mean, when you watch documentaries or when you watch documentaries or even narrative films, and I don't know if anyone else is like this, but you kind of like twinge at like certain parts. You're just like, oh, I didn't like the way that they presented that, or even a news story when you're like, oh, I feel like they could have like said it differently. When you like make your own, like you're in charge of that.
Exactly.
And you get to, and I'm very big on asking the people that I interview and other people, like, is this going to be portrayed in a way that is true and in a way that, you know, doesn't bother people or make people uncomfortable? And so I'm very into just like, I want people to feel comfortable when they watch it, because it's very uncomfortable material, and you're going to feel uncomfortable anyway, that it might as well be like, right, it might as well be that.
And I have a question for you also, talking about the film Perfection, and then we're going to get into your latest project in a few minutes. For people who are watching who perhaps have someone in their home, or maybe they themselves are struggling with eating disorder, what is it that you've learned from doing this, or did you learn, that really causes people, I know you're not a psychologist, but maybe you can provide some additional insight, cause people who are susceptible to, and you know, to engaging in that type of behavior? Was there something that came out to let you know why they do it?
So the film is called Perfection because all three of those young women were perfectionists. And I think a lot of us have that tendency to want to do something and make it perfect. And especially if you have perfectionistic parents, that will, I mean, I work with school children, and that's one of the biggest things I notice is if there's a student who really cares about things being perfect and being right, when you wouldn't normally think so, because you're just like, oh, kids are messy, you immediately know it's, oh, because that's kind of what they're being told at home. That's kind of how, or that's kind of what they see their parents doing, just very, you know, perfectionistic behavior. There's also an sort of obsession with control. It was a big thing that I noticed when I talked to these girls in ways that when you're separated from it, you see that you can't control everything and that you can't make everything perfect. But when you're in it and you are already suffering with, you know, depression, or you're just a teenage girl and you are listening to everything, if you're absorbing media as a teenage girl, there's going to be a lot of thoughts in your head that will make you susceptible to disordered eating behavior. And then, you know, add on wanting to control everything, wanting everything to be perfect. I think that can make you sort of susceptible. But then when it comes down to it, I think that a lot of the times it's just based, it's just like an individual basis type thing. It's just how important it is to you to look a certain way or feel a certain way, and what you will go through to obtain that goal.
Now, you know, I have a women's initiative, and I talk to women of all different ages, and one of the areas that we do talk about a lot has to do with the impact that media has on women in general, but I imagine to a large degree to people who suffer with eating disorders. In your words, your own words, what impact do you think that has on someone who might be, you know, struggling with eating disorders? Because if you look at magazines, you know, they don't take a picture of someone and present them as they are. All of the photoshopping happens. You know, there's taking, you know, half of a person's thigh or whatever, and it's so. Talk about that and how that's maybe serving as a disservice to women and the impact that that's having on young women in particular.
I think growing up, you're already, and I can only speak just as a young woman, but growing up, you're already kind of obsessed with celebrities and models and pretty things. And, you know, especially when you're like 13 and you're about to start developing, all you want is to just look like a full-grown woman who's just beautiful, right? Because you feel awkward, you feel uncomfortable, all of your friends are awkward, it's just this big thing. So you're already, I feel like that's a baseline for most young women. So then if you think about just how unfair and cruel it is to present those types of photoshopped images to the population in general, but especially to this vulnerable population. It's already, again, baseline a cruel thing to do, because people are already sort of obsessed with that. And then add on, if you are struggling with an eating disorder, your mind is kind of, it's always on that. What struck me about eating disorders is that it's routine. It's not, oh, I do this sometimes when I feel sad. Maybe a purge, but in itself, it's a routine thing to do. So you're already that's all you think about. And so then if you digest any image that's photoshopped, or any image that's just very unrealistic, the person doesn't have your body type, the person doesn't eat that much, they may have an eating disorder themselves. It's extremely deteriorating to everything inside of you. It takes away all of the good things that you think about yourself, because when you look at yourself, you're looking at a real body and you're looking at it up close.
Right.
When you look at, a Victoria's Secret model, which was something I heard a lot, was, Victoria's Secret models, they're perfect. And they are, if you watch those commercials and everything. You compare your real self, especially if you are developing, to that's not going to make you feel good about yourself.
And if the truth were to be told, there's a lot of taping and angles of the camera that are being used to make people look perfect.
Right.
But if you see these women on the streets, it's not at all what it looks like.
Right. I remember growing up, I always thought that Victoria's Secret women were the more real looking models. They weren't like the runway models, because, they all look full chested and they look like they have hips and everything, and then I would start to see pictures of them just on the street, and I was just like, oh, they are just as gaunt as runway models. And that definitely said a lot to me. It was you take obviously if you take a very skinny looking thing, you can enhance certain parts, and
they're selling underwear, and of course they want to make a woman look voluptuous or whatever.
Right.
And so they do whatever they need to. We're going to take another quick break. Okay. And when we come back, we're going to talk about your latest project, because that's something I also want to delve into, and I want to make sure we have enough time. Okay. So we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come right back with more Metro Magazine.
When you throw away money on wasted electricity, you're throwing away everything you could have bought with it. Saving energy saves you money.
Monica, when we went to break, you were talking about, we were just kind of wrapping up, I guess, your work on perfection. But you said something off camera that I want you to talk about, to say on camera rather, talking about the compulsion. Why is it? Because I said to you that we all struggle with something. And I also stated that the fact that you're doing this helps a great deal, because it's not this terrible secret that people struggle with, because when it's brought out into the open, it gives everyone an opportunity, I think, to form community around people who have problems that they're struggling with. And we all do. Yeah. If we were to sit down, every person watching this show, and sit down and say, okay, what is it that I struggle? We all have something that we deal with every single day. And this happens to be someone who wants to be perfect. So say what you will, if you will, what you said off camera about it being a compulsion.
Well, so what I've learned from making these two projects is that absolutely everyone has things in life that make them uncomfortable. It's just part of being human. And we all have our compulsions, our coping mechanisms to make that stuff go away, to give you, whether it's short-term or long-term relief. That's kind of what makes the difference, because in these cases with both eating disorders and self-injury, it may seem like an extreme way to handle distress, but if you look on the flip side, we do all of these like little things to make ourselves feel better. If you look at someone who has like OCD, to other people it may look like little things. It may look like, counting or moving the salt shaker closer to the pepper shaker, but it's giving them relief, you know? And so in the same way, when you harm yourself or if you're purging, it's giving you relief from something.
From a symptom of something that's
Right.
going on.
It's, and what we try and do when we're looking at recovery and everything is find pretty much better coping mechanisms, better compulsions that give you relief more long term. It just so happens that those things are hard to switch to when you're used to like immediate relief. When you're used to, I'm feeling really bad, now I feel okay, or now I feel good. Because a lot of these things do release certain endorphins that give you a certain high. And you know, that's going to be all you want when you are just hurting all of the time.
Wow. Now, when we started out the show this morning, we showed some clips from your latest project, Self-Inflicted, and this is a great time to maybe segue into that. Talk about, first of all, explain what Self-Inflicted is about, and let's talk about why you decided this was a good next project for you.
So Self-Inflicted is about non-suicidal self-injury. So like people who cut themselves or burn themselves, it's intentional, almost destruction of your body tissue to relieve emotional distress. So the project is pretty much about that. We have people in the film who have self-harmed for 28 years.
Wow.
And we have people in it who tried it for 6 months. And we look at, you know, the connections with both of them because, again, it is a compulsion, it is a coping mechanism. And I also interviewed the top researchers in the field of, you know, non-suicidal self-injury, the people who have been researching this behavior for like 10 years from like a psychological standpoint and a sociological standpoint. You know, how many people do it, why do people start doing it, are there little communities of it, that type of thing. And
you bring up an interesting point. People who self-injure, do they normally do it by themselves? You said, is there a community? I mean, I'm thinking, is it like people get together and do?
Well, so on an individual basis, I think people will, people from the beginning of time have pretty much done everything that a person can do.
I think so.
Yeah, so I mean, self-injury isn't new. It's written in ancient texts and everything, and I think in earlier societies, if there were communities that would harm themselves, I can't reference anything specific, but I know that that's happened, and it's more of a.
And if it's out there. There's self-mutilation. It's very, very common in certain
it's
cultures.
like almost like ritualistic, and there's intention there. The type that we focus on in the film is more individual, is more, you know, people who are using it as a coping mechanism for their...
Is it for guilt? Are they trying to, are they feeling guilty about something?
There is some people, yeah. I mean, there's so many different motivations to harm yourself because in my mind, it's as simple of a compulsion as anything else because it's so immediate. Again, like it's not like eating disorders where that's routine. That's you know, it's a compulsion that can come whether you're doing it all the time or you do it a couple times a year or you try it just for a little bit. So we definitely look at just like the individual who self-harms, and I mean some motivations are guilt, so it would be like a self-punishment type of thing. A big kind of blanket thing is that you're taking emotional pain and you're making it physical, and so you're making it fixable almost. If you harm yourself, you can take care of that wound, you can put a band-aid on it, you can make sure it doesn't get infected. People who self-injure are taking emotional pain and making it physical, so it is a physical manifestation of how they're feeling inside. And when you're dealing with that much pain, it's just so hard. I mean, we all know that it's so hard to deal with emotional wounds. And there isn't exactly, you know, a book with all of the answers of how to deal with every situation. And so these people have found a way to deal with it for themselves. It makes sense with your the way that your brain is actually wired because the part of your brain that processes physical pain is the same part of your brain that processes emotional pain. They're actually tied. So when you harm yourselves and then maybe you get relief from that physical pain, you get relief from your emotional pain. You also have a bunch of endorphins that are released when you harm yourself. So it actually does work in that moment. what's the huge problem with it is that it's a maladaptive coping mechanism. It's extremely addictive because of that endorphin rush. And it does, for a lot of people, become this sort of lifestyle, this coping mechanism that they always go to, because as a human, you're always going to have things that make you uncomfortable. You're always going to have things that give you a lot of distress. So if this is the way that you handle it, it's going to continue for a very long time.
Now, I saw examples of two different types of self-inflicting behavior in the film that I saw. Now, I saw the example of burning and another one of cutting. Are there other types?
Not that I interviewed, but I know that people can break their own bones, punching, walls, branding themselves. There's a lot of things, but it's because it's just intentional, destruction of body tissue to remove emotional distress. So things that self-injury is not are picking little nervous habits, because I get asked that a lot of is that self-injury because I feel relief from that. That's actually called something else. I don't remember the name of it, but in my mind it's a part of the spectrum. It's probably on the lower end of the spectrum, because while that's maladaptive too, because you shouldn't be just destroying parts of yourself to relieve distress. It's not going to help you in the long run. It's not the same as destruction of body tissue or breaking your own bones. So those are different types.
Now, I know that your film is being distributed. Talk about some of the places where they are buying the film to. Is it, organizations? Talk about that a little bit.
So Human Relations Media picked up both Perfection and Self-Inflicted for educational distribution. So it's being made available to every school in the country and English-speaking countries, K through 12, and colleges and universities. And it's also available to hospitals and programs like rehab facilities, things like that. Organizations would also be able to purchase the film. So it's pretty much just educational outlets. Okay,
and it's interesting to me that this is being distributed to schools, and so immediately I think, if they're showing it in schools, it's to students or okay. Yeah. And what about the parent side of it? Because kids spend most of their time at home with parents. What's being done to bring them into the fold so that they can perhaps be supportive of kids who are struggling with this?
So I don't know what the specific plans would be for, if a school purchased it, maybe they would also show it at an assembly or something. But the extended version of the film is also going to be available online once I release it later this year. And Perfection's available online. And so if parents need to watch that type of material, they can go to my website, which is monicazinn.com. And they're available there. In Self-Inflicted, we actually interview a parent of a self-harmer and get her perspective, and we also interview a sister because it definitely affects families.
And that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. Because yes, if a loved one is going through a situation where they're struggling with something, it's not just them, it's everybody that's around them. So talk to me, if you will, about what is it that, based upon your working with people who are struggling with this issue, what can parents do, or what can sisters or brothers do? Were you able to gain any perspective in that regard to help them?
Personally, I think the biggest thing you can do is listen and actually listen.
Listen without judgment.
Yes, to sit down and, one, to just let them know that you will listen. And you have to be in a place where you're actually going to listen. Actually shut your mouth and don't say anything, and let them get everything out so that they feel like it's just a safe place where they can share everything that they're feeling. And
that's important, because as a parent, I know one of the things that parents want to do, they want to fix everything. And we try to fix everything with this. And that's very, very good advice. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, it's fine. So I think that's the biggest thing you can do as a starting point is let your loved one know that you are there for them if they want to talk about it, and then actually be there. Don't come to that conversation thinking that you know how to fix it, because every individual, as I've said, because I can't speak for why everyone self-harms, because like eating disorders, there's just a million reasons why people start doing this. So, you could have done all of the research in the world, but you still need to just sit down and listen to what they're going through, because something is going on that they are having to cope with. Because the self-injury itself, and I would also say don't focus on the self-injury. Don't be horrified by it, don't be traumatized by it, and don't make them feel more ashamed of the way that they are choosing to cope with that, because they don't want to be identified by that behavior. They want to be identified by their struggles, by what they're going through. So you need to listen about exactly what they're going through, and then just let it be open. Let them figure out kind of where they're at, what type of recovery or problem solving that they're comfortable with. Don't make them do anything that it makes them really uncomfortable, because that's just going to make them want to use the coping mechanism that they're used to. And I would say, just offer love and support. I mean, it's definitely not a problem or a behavior that can be fixed immediately. It's I think mainly what people who are self-harming need is to just know that their family and loved ones still love them, even though they are doing this behavior, and that they're there for them no matter what. Because then I know that me personally, if I feel like I'm in a safe place in any interaction or any relationship or any problem, that's the baseline for me to feel like I can move forward. But if I feel like I'm being judged in any way, or if I feel like, and I'm very susceptible to just like energies even, if I feel in any way like uncomfortable or unsafe, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to feel like I can make that next step. So, you have to do your very best to make sure that your loved one feels safe and supported. Give them that safety net, because they're going through a lot. And obviously if they knew a way to stop, they would have. And that's another thing that people I don't think understand is that people, when they're self-harming, they want to stop most of the time.
It's and I think what people who don't struggle with that, the very first thing that pops in front of mind is that, oh, you have a choice. And talk about that, because I think maybe they don't in their minds have a choice. It's something that they must do. Speak to that for a moment, if you will.
So if that's the coping mechanism you're using, you don't really have a choice. You don't have a choice in coping. You don't have a choice a lot of times that you have a compulsion, because you can't control everything that goes on around you, and that stuff is always going to affect you. No person is just this stone statue where stressors in your life just bounce off. It affects you. It affects everyone. So if you've found something that works for you, you're not going to stop. But then it just happens to add on to the stress, because it becomes this this thing that you're hiding, this thing that you're ashamed of, this thing that you're realizing doesn't make you feel better in the long run. And so what I've noticed with the people that I've talked to is that every time they were self-harming, they didn't want to. It just always felt like a last resort. They would try, other things, and it just wasn't working for them. So again, that's one of those judgments that if you come at it why don't you just stop? The point is that they would have already if they found something that worked for them. So that's why, again, it has to be this safe place where you can work together to try and figure out what type of therapies or what type of coping mechanisms will work for that individual.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here listening to you, and I still have to remind myself that you're a 21-year-old woman who obviously has researched and have a lot of empathy and just a lot of other wonderful things to help you to be able to delve into both these subjects on such a level that you can communicate it in a way that I think is going to be very, very impactful to the people who watch your films. So let me ask you, I know you're still getting this latest project out there. What's new? What's on the horizon for you? Is there another subject you're going to tackle, or you kind of just let it happen organically?
So the company that's distributing my films has offered to fund my next project, which is very exciting because I've never had a company offer to do that before.
I think there's going to be a lot more of that because you're really good at what you do.
Thank you.
Trust me, you're very, very good.
So now that I wouldn't have to worry about funding as much, I do feel the freedom to sort of let my mind wander, to listen to the stories around me. I wouldn't want to start any project just because I feel like I have to.
Right.
So as of right now, I don't know what my next project will be. I know that there's a lot of things that affect me in very different ways, and I would want to explore those first within myself, and then, you know, start to ask around. I mean, one of my favorite parts of my filmmaking is the research and pre-production part, because I just get to learn. I just get to talk to so many people and figure out. I mean, I remember when I was doing this with Self-Inflicted 3 years ago, I was just blown away by all of the stories I was receiving and by all of the research I was getting and how contradictory it was to what I had thought and what I had been hearing. And that's really exciting. I would say all the time, I was like, I'm on the verge of something. Like, I was just like, this, I mean, not even just with self-injury itself, but just like with like the human condition. Like, I was just like, people don't like talk about this, because as soon as, like, it only took a couple facts of self-injury for me to realize how human this is, and that it's not like crazy different. And once I realized that, it just opened my mind up to the struggles of everyone and how we all cope with different things. And so I think, you know, I'm glad to be in that place, and I just want to, you know, keep listening to people, and if something, you know, sparks my interest, and I feel like for the most part I will make a film because I feel like that story, that perspective hasn't been out there. I wouldn't ever want to do something that like was just already out there, where I felt like, oh, okay, there's something out there for people who are struggling with this, and I feel like that's like good.
Right.
With both of these things, I was just like, like I don't like, I'm not seeing this story, and I feel it's important. So whatever my next project will be will kind of fall along with that.
I am sure whatever you settle on, it's going to be exceptional, and I am so honored to meet you.
Thank you so much.
And I really, really thank you for stopping in and sharing with our audience, our Metro Magazine audience, your story and the work that you're doing. That, again, you're making such a huge impact. And we'd love for you to stay in touch with us and let us know what the next project is, so you can come back and share again. And if you would just look at the camera and let everyone know how they can reach out to you if perhaps they have an interesting story they'd like to share.
So everyone can go to my website, which is www.monicazinn.com. And on that website, there actually is a Contact Me tab where you can send me an email. And there's information about all of my films. And we also, if you are struggling with self-injury, or you just need someone to listen, Self-Inflicted is actually a partner with 7 Cups of Tea, which is an active listening website. And on my website at the bottom, there are listeners ready for you if you need to call them and talk to them. And so that's a great resource for anyone, and we're so happy to be a partner with them as well.
Thank you so much. And that's going to wrap it up for us this week on Metro Magazine. And we are so happy that you stopped in to spend your morning with us. And please know how much we appreciate your time, because I know you could be someplace else. And we'll see you next week, same time, same place. And that'll do it for us. And we'll see you on the flip side.